He's always got the time.
Is that because of his... I can't say that. He's got a watch. Have the size of his
Zoom
watch.
into his watch. It's a great watch, but he's always got the time.
The summer is well and truly underway, which means it's cricket season on the watch. In this episode, we're joined by a Victorian great. He's a 5-time Sheffield Shield champion and the proud owner of Baggy Green 429. Introducing Bob Quiney. Firstly, Bob, Bobby, Robert, Rob, what's the name that you go with? I've heard it all.
Oh, have you? I'm sure there's more than just those you just reeled off as well, but I prefer Bob or Bobby. I think it comes across a bit more jocular, and I like to have a bit of fun. So there was a mate in year 9 that started calling me Bob, and that sort of stuck as well. So Bob or Bobby, but to be honest, like, you call me whatever you want, Benny.
Well, Bobby, it is great to have you on. Really appreciate your time. Good to see you. I take it you're still a big cricket man?
Yeah, I stay in touch, surely. Yeah. I enjoy watching cricket when I get the chance to. I'm fortunate enough to commentate some games now domestically, so I get to see enough of the cricket. But yeah, it's a lot better watching, knowing that you don't have to do the warm-ups and the pre-seasons anymore. But yeah, there's still elements that you do miss, and the adrenaline that cricket provided that I miss. But otherwise, it's been good on the other side of the fence.
No doubt. We'll talk a little bit about the first test and the summer ahead a little bit later on. But I want to start with your career and how it all came about, and then the highs and the lows throughout. Yep. I'm sure there's plenty of memories, plenty of stories. But I did some research and noticed your very first game. So I guess it would be most common for a youngster to debut for Victoria, playing against New South Wales and all of that. But you played against a touring World 11. That must have been an insane experience because some of the names in that team were phenomenal.
Crazy. I think you had like Graham Smith, Jacques Kellis, Dan Vittori, there was Murali, Shoaib Akhtar. There was some solid names, Sean Pollock. There's probably some that a lot of people out there don't remember, but they were just amazing cricketers in their own right. Kevin Peterson was amongst there as well.
And you were how old?
I was 23, I reckon. Yeah. So I was old enough, but definitely, I was definitely very daunted. One blessing that the game was at the Junction Oval, where I played a lot of my Premier cricket with St Kilda. But the atmosphere was next level. It was, even having like 6,000 or 7,000 at the Junction Oval felt like a packed stadium. And yeah, it was pretty cool. But I walked into the Victorian dressing room feeling like a bit of an imposter in the first place, let alone stepping onto the field with the names I've just reeled off. So yeah, it was a pretty cool game to be a part of.
Who'd you face?
I wish I faced Akhtar because I love the ball coming on. I came in at, I think, number 6 or 7, and I faced Murali, and I faced Dan Vittori. So, from the TV, you watch Murali and you think it's hard to face, and it took me at least 2 balls to actually watch the ball out of Murali's hands because his face is so intimidating when he bowls. And I played a miss at a couple, then had to adjust and try and line up again with Murali. But I thought, Vittori, left arm orthodox, easy, no worries. Just, the class of him to be able to change his pace and variations without seeing any cues was the reason he was so successful. So I didn't have much fun of it, and unfortunately I got run out. Jacques Kellis threw the ball in from the boundary, direct hit, and I think I've said this recently somewhere that they didn't come to the ground to watch me bat. I was safe, but bad luck, Bobby. You keep running off and get off the field.
At least you can say Murali didn't get you out then.
Yeah, correct. I don't think I put bat on ball, but he did get me out.
What was it like picking up the action?
It was too hard, for me. And as I said, spin was my Achilles heel. It was something that I wish if I had turned back time, I would have spent more time working on when I was younger. But I never ever thought that I'd be professional. So I thought just doing what I needed to do was enough. Lucky enough, later into my career, there was a Sri Lankan T20 tournament, I reckon about 10 years ago, and I was in Murali's team. I thought, how good's this? Great fella. It was good to hang around with, but had the ability to face him in the nets and some centre wicket, and slowly started to pick him. I probably went at 60% still, but it was better than what I was, yeah. So it was, and you can see, no doubt, how he made life so difficult for international batsmen across the world.
So you no doubt played with some massive names. Who are some of the other ones that really stick out in your mind?
Well, I mean, my Victorian team, when I played with them, were pretty star-studded. I think of guys like Brad Hodge, David Hussey, Cameron White straight off the bat, and then you throw in Matty Wade, played a large chunk of my cricket with him. Scott Boland now, John Hastings, like they're all guys who played for Australia. I know I'm going to miss a couple here. John Holland, Clint Mackay all played for Australia. Clint took a hat trick for Australia, and then you go to sort of IPL and lucky enough to play with Warney, Graham Smith, Morne Morkel, who were. We was in South Africa, that IPL, and just walking down the streets and, I try not to hang with them too much because you don't want to be seen like you're just living out of their pockets. But the times where you do get the invite, you don't say no because it doesn't come around too often, and you go with them and you just think sometimes, oh yeah, they're lucky, they're a lot of money and all, they've got a profile, but it comes with a bit of baggage as well. So that was that. And then in the Aussie side, obviously, a really, really short time there, but thinking about, Warner, Clark, Ponting, Hussey, it was amazing. And then being in the IPL, just being around, like you go to the breakfast room and the breakfast area, and you got Sehwag, you got Tendulkar, you got those guys just having breakfast 3 tables away. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Did you get to experience much overseas in your playing career?
Yeah, heaps, and so lucky that we got to fly everywhere. Been to India, South Africa, England multiple times, which I loved, and I would encourage any young cricketer, particularly batters, to in the off season go and play cricket in England if they can, because not only is it good for your cricket, it's a really good lifestyle learning. There's times where it's easy just to sort of get caught up and be drinking piss all the time. If you find the balance of celebrating and learning to connect with teammates, but you are the main man there. So you are the pro. You've got to go over there and win games for your team. And quite often the guys who do that they're not that player back here. So it's actually a really good learning opportunity there. Switzerland, Austria, Sri Lanka. Where else? I think there might be 1 or 2 more, but yeah, amazing opportunities to go overseas.
The atmosphere in India must be unrivaled, surely.
Yeah, I probably only got about 70% of it, simply because, so the IPL when I was in South Africa, and we went over once actually for Champions League. So they used to have a competition where I think England, New Zealand, Australia, the IPL had their top 2 sides go and play off in this tournament called the Champions League. I thought it was awesome. And it was probably there was a stadium in Delhi that was like 3/4 full, and there's no point even trying to yell at someone. It's not like you can't hear anyone, and it's all about hand signals. It's like keeping an eye on certain people and just like being a leader and taking some just being proactive and making sure you get shit done. But the atmosphere is, so you've got on the field where it's loud. You've got the bus all the way in where people are staring at you, waving at you, honking at you, and then just being over there in general. And unless they know most cricketers, right? But if you're sort of the bottom percentage of profile cricketers, which I was, quite often you get mistaken for other people, and you could use that to your advantage at times for a free tuk-tuk, or sometimes you got to remind them that you do play cricket just in case you can get a free tuk-tuk. So no, it's a great place.
They must get treated like royalty.
They do, yeah. But again, like you hear stories, whether it's true or not, that blokes like Tendulkar could only drive his car or motorbike, wherever it was, like in the midst of night, just because there'd be so many people around, and different dinner times. Again, there's so many more perks being those people over there, but there's definitely some constraints around the limitations as to where you can go, how you can do things. But they're just cricket mad and they love it, and you see. The way we always talk about, playing in the backyard or playing in the street. Well, in India, they haven't lost any of that. They play wherever they can play, and it's so you could. I went to Mumbai recently, and we're at a facility, and I reckon yonder there's like this a paddock. I don't even know how to describe it. Right, looks like wastelands, to be honest. But sure enough, like in the late afternoon, you've got this group of 5 or 6 kids. They've picked up some sticks. They've got a ball and they're hitting the ball around just this random area just because they love cricket so much. So, it's a superb place to be. It can be challenging at times as well, but yeah, it's a great spot.
The IPL auction happened about a week ago, and some of the numbers, I think Rishabh Pant got 4.7 million. Some of the Aussies have done well. Stark, Hazelwood over recent years.
Yep.
Do you look at that and think, gee, I was 5 or 10 years before my time?
No, it's funny, Benny, because I reckon my game should have been suited to T20, but I reckon I only had like 2 half seasons where I did any good with the Stars. And having a season with IPL was probably one too many to where my ability was. I don't know how the Indians' tax system works. I'm sure there's fluidity throughout, the higher echelon, but definitely when those guys. So we look at that, and Stark got what, 2 million? Is that right? You'd halve that straight away. I know it's US dollars, but you'd halve that straight away. And because we know the tax system here, they don't miss you. So yes, it looks good at the front and centre. There's also part of the contracts is weighted where $2 million means if you play every game, and if you only play half the games, well then it's quoted down, so you get less. So sometimes it can be like all glitz and glam, and look at the numbers and go, oh, holy shit, how good's this? And then you get there and you're like, geez, and it makes the players want to play because there's something on the line, but then you got to get selected as well.
Yeah, true. So what do you consider your best format?
One day cricket.
Yep.
I preferred to play the red ball. And I probably got some sort of success there over a couple of years, but I reckon probably what suited my game and my temperament was one-day cricket. And I think if I ever was to play for Australia, if I had my time again, I reckon the one-day game probably would have suited me a little bit better. But it was, when I was playing Shield cricket and one-day cricket, I think when 2020 come in, it was almost like, mate, this is made for you. You just go out and do the same thing. And it took me ages to work out a method that could work, because I sort of went even harder, and I didn't have a method for quite a while, and I just wasn't getting any runs. And the easiest spot to bat is up the top, and I had so many chances at the top, and it just didn't happen.
Do you feel frustrated in the sense that you didn't get a chance internationally in 50 over cricket to really show that was your format? Obviously, you got the test.
Yeah,
opportunity.
No, not at all. No, as I said before, I never aspired to play the next level. It's probably one thing that I should have done a little bit more. Like when I went to St Kilda, I never aspired to play first 11 until I got near, and the same with Victoria and then Australia. So, yeah, but in terms of like me thinking, if someone said to me at 20 years old, you're going to play for Australia in a format, I'd be like, anything, just give me anything. But then looking what I saw the batters had to do in the years prior to me coming in, what amount of runs and the numbers they had to stack up compared to what I did, I'm like, I deserved my chance to play for Australia, but I didn't barricade the door down. I reckon I missed a really tough era by, 3 years. I reckon I was in the mix of when there was a bit of change. I tell people at times I reckon I fast-tracked Ricky Ponting's retirement because he wanted to nestle down at 4 and have a bit more time with his feet up, and I kept, in that series, in the 2 matches I played, I kept getting out cheaply, which meant that he'd get to the crease a little bit early, and like Ponting was coming to the end. Clark was still going okay, but towards the latter years, Warner was obviously in his peak. Hussey was coming to the end, so it was probably, I missed it by 3 years in terms of that real powerhouse, or the second coming of that powerhouse, and but it was still good to be amongst. But you don't see. Someone said to me today, I was speaking with John Inverarity 3 days ago, I reckon, and he was talking about who are the next batters coming in. And you can reel off potential names, and you can reel off some names who bat 4, 5, and 6. But in terms of the top order, who are between 25 and 30, there's no one who's actually crushed the door right now. Bancroft's been good for 3 years. Harris has been good for 3 years. Renshaw sort of comes and goes a little bit, but it makes a point when you think about the days of, I think it was like Lehman, Love, DiVinito, Cox, like all these names that people go, who the fuck are they? But they're names who made 1,000 runs in a season, and it doesn't happen as much anymore.
So your test opportunity, although, as you say, you didn't quite have the success, that experience must have been pretty unique.
It was a genuine whirlwind, right, Benny? So I went and played an Australia A game the week before with no intentions that I'm a chance to play the next level. I went there thinking I've definitely deserved to have a chance at Australia A, and there was a couple other guys in the side that if I thought the selectors were looking at. So I went about my business, thought great experience. Dale Steyn was bowling for Lander. Imran Tahir, who's a spinner, who I was really keen to have a look at and face because, again, spin was my Achilles heel. and I think I got 70 or 80 in that first innings, and thought that's pretty cool. Like, I feel good, and it's good to do in front of your peers as well who've been selected in the same side, because quite often in sides like that, we've got a mix of people. Some have got their eye on there. Some realise they need to make a most of that opportunity. It was good to sort of say, hey, I can bat. And then after that game, John and Verity come over and we had a chat and went over to the little viewing area at the SCG where you see where people waiting to bat in the test match. And he said, you're going up to Queensland to be on standby for Shane Watson for the first test, and you'll probably play. You're like, that's like a what the hell moment. And yeah, got up to Queensland. A day in, 24 hours in, they ruled Watson out and said, you're right to play. I think we had 3 or 4 days lead up to that first test against South Africa, and it was awesome. And the build up to that was unreal, and the amount of support and messages and well wishes I got was phenomenal. And it was probably from that I felt that's where I felt like I let a lot of people down. It was an amazing experience to be involved on the field there. I took pride in my fielding as much as I did my batting, and I fielded quite well. But ultimately, I fielded well and bowled okay, and I just batted shit out. So that was the only reason. If I could try and switch it somehow, I'm happy to shell 2 catches if it meant I made 50 or 60 runs. So, but Brisbane was good. Only got the 1 innings there, and then went to Adelaide. And I think they said straight away you're playing, but I'm pretty sure Watto was fit and could have played. And I think they just sort of gave me another opportunity and clearly stuffed that up by making a pair. And then it was such a big high. And for those who get to see this podcast, like you get that massive curve up. Say, hey, I'm playing for Australia. What's this? To not do very well, and the down you go lower than you were when you originally got picked. And I thought I was okay, but after being dropped, I was a bit nowhere for a little bit, but I was okay with being dropped because I didn't do my job. It was more just like there's that opportunity. I'd let a shitload of people down, and I was like, that's it. It's all done. Like, that's how fast it happened.
Does it feel like, and in that moment, your international career is done? Obviously, there's time, but is that how it feels?
It did at the time, and then Punter come out and retired, and it was like there's a pulse. Like maybe, and this is where, Warney was amazing. Warney come out and said, they should have picked me to replace him, and, I've just come out of the side. But that's where they picked Phil. I think Phil Hughes was already in at that stage, and then he obviously kicked on and batted really well. But it was just like it was done, and it was such a hollow feeling that, a lot of people talk about, but you've got your Baggy Green, like you got to play for Australia. It's like, yeah, but let's say if I gave you a chocolate bar and I got you 1 bit, like, are you going to want more? Yeah. If you played a game of NBA and you just want 2 points, you get 2 points, I guarantee you want more. Or you play 5 minutes, you put up 2 shots and you don't get one, you're like, just give me one more game because I want to score. And that's where I'm at, right? So, to finish on a pair, you can look at it, it's pretty embarrassing really. But I just wanted the opportunity to show that I could play at that level, and maybe I couldn't. Hence why, after 3 innings, I got the flick. But yeah, there's definitely it's bittersweet to say that I played for Australia because I didn't do any bloody good.
Oh yes, good delivery, a beauty, a pair for Rob Quiney, a desperate moment.
Was it intimidating out there?
When you see on TV, like Channel 9, all that sort of stuff, it didn't feel intimidating. I was always nervous going out to bat like I always am, but it didn't feel super intimidating at all, nah.
Who gave you the baggie?
Alan Border, who he was my absolute idol growing up. Loved watching him. Like him, Mark Taylor, Michael Slater used to watch batting, but Alan Border, and then obviously him being the captain, number 1, he was a gun. And pure coincidence, I saw him only a few days ago, which was so good. He was a commentator during that time in the domestic cricket. So when he gave me my cap, he said, you deserve this. Welcome to the club. A couple of other things that were really nice. And it was nice to catch up with him recently.
One thing I find funny about your test debut is the fact that you got such an opportunity to bowl, because I watched a fair bit of Shield and one-day cricket back then in the sort of 2010 era, and you didn't bowl that much for Victoria, really. And it was almost as though they wanted an all-rounder out of sort of nothing. I think Hussey started bowling a few overs, and he'd get a wicket before lunch every time he'd bowl, and they're like, oh, we need another person that can just bowl seam up, which, I mean, everyone that bats bowls 120k in the nets and just, thinks they can bowl a little bit. But you ended up bowling, 10, 11 overs for not too many runs, pretty tidy, but you must never have thought you were going to bowl in Test cricket. Surely.
No, not at all. And I think that's where sometimes I have the don't care factor in terms of when I was bowling, I was like, I'm going to have a bit of fun with this.
Yeah, I'm not a bowler, it doesn't matter.
Correct. And I ended up, I think I bowled 25 overs for 29 runs. But it was, I remember realising, geez, what am I doing here? I remember I called Michael Clark over because I was just trying to bowl line and length, and they weren't really scoring. The game was petering out. And I said, can I bounce Callis here? And he goes, if you want, mate. And I was like, okay, no worries. And then I tried to bounce Callis. I can't remember how high I got, but he just watched it like sail past his chest probably and bounce 3 times to Matty Wade as the keeper. But that's probably their state of mind, is that they didn't want to take a risk. They don't want to give the series to us. They wouldn't open an end that they couldn't play a pull shot of bloke bowling 118 k's an hour. So... it was interesting. It was good to be involved in the game from that sense because it distracted me from knowing that I hadn't made runs. But yeah, as I said, I try and make light of it. And if I do a speaking gig somewhere, then I talk about being a test bowler versus a test batter. But yeah, it's, as I said, it's bittersweet.
I've also got a memory, and I don't know if there's any research or facts out there to back this up, but did you wicket keep at some point in the Big Bash?
Big Bash, yeah, I did. Yeah. So Warney had this theory. I can't remember. Maybe Pete Hanscom wasn't getting many runs, or maybe they just thought he wasn't ready at some stage. And I think Matty Wade was playing for Australia, and him and Greg Shippard said, we want you to take the gloves for team balance, right? So I don't think I was opening. Maybe I was batting at 5 and 6 as well. But you just got to do a job. And generally just like, what the fuck's happening here? Like, I shouldn't be keeping it all. So I kept 2 games. One was at the Gabba in fact, I kept 3 games now that I think about it. That's ridiculous. I kept one at the Gabba to Warney, which was awesome. I took a ball down leg side off Warney. You get a blind spot, and then like took the bail off thinking I was a keeper and all that sort of jazz. Got through that okay. Then I kept against the Thunder, and when the ball comes to an area where you think the batter hits it 9.5 times out of 10. And I was up to the stumps to Dimmy Mascarenas, and the Matty Pry, who was from England, was the batter. It was a half volley, genuine half volley, and he went to play a drive, missed it, hit my arm and went up into the grill. And so like I'm looking around, the ball's right in my grill. And you're sitting there going, this is how much like this is taking the piss. I should not be keeping. And then the last one I was keeping was the Renegades game, the Derby, where you remember when Warne and Samuels are having a go at each other.
Come on, what an over from Shane Warne.
Grab some people. They grab some more people. You, man.
That was interesting. I think Clint Mackay was bowling at the time, and it kicked off with Marlon, and so he just walked straight out of his crease. Dave Hussey was at mid-on, threw the ball to me, and he goes, take your bails off. And I was like, nah, like he's like, take the fucking bails off. I said, man, and Warney's like, take the bails off, Bobby. He's like, okay, it was, and they called, yeah, correct. And it was dead ball by then, but it's good homework by you. Like I don't know how.
It wasn't really homework. It's just in my niche mind.
What is it?
Yeah, I couldn't actually find any proof.
No. Well, there's a photo there's a picture of me with the ball in my grill.
Yeah, right.
When I'm keeping. So no, I look back at those experiences and think it's pretty funny. Enjoying trying to keep, and if I can get away with doing it to that level, I didn't drop any catches, so keeping can't be that hard.
So the stop grabbing people comment by Shane Warne, how
grab a hold of someone, Marlon.
How did that play out? Like, it looked like just great theatre, but was it tense?
So Marlon thought he was having fun with Huss when Marlon was bowling, and Huss was like, mate, don't touch me. And it was meant to be some sort of like really subtle way of like making sure they don't run 2 at some stage. Huss would have come back in and everyone saw it. Like, oh, no, he just kept grabbing his shirt. Like, and they would have come across each other in IPL and other fixtures. And I think Warney had got the shits. We might have lost a couple of games, and some built up frustration. And so he and whether he had a prior sort of dealing with Marlon Samuels as well, I don't know. but it was just out of nowhere, and he started grabbing his shirt, and it's just like he's like, "You want to grab a hold of someone, Marlon?" He's like, and Marlon's like, "What the fuck's going on here?" And then got to the stage where Warney kept going, and Marlon threw his bat and walked out of his crease and had enough. So yeah, kicked off. It was great for the rivalry.
Yeah.
So good for the rivalry. And poor Finchie was stuck in the middle because Finchie will always call things how he sees them, irrespective of who he is. But there's always an element of protecting someone, your own player. But he was also a good mate with Warney at the same time. So he was sort of like, he tried to be somewhat of a mediator without ruffling Warney's feathers, but also making sure that Marlon was okay as well. So tough job, that one.
I feel like that's when the Big Bash was really peaking. It's probably in a bit of a lull at the moment. Where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, I'd probably see it more being like your Joe Blow now than I have even the last few years, and simply because you're sort of in and around the system, and there's so much change now, and it's franchise model, so you're going to get change. I try and use my friends and people, my contacts, to give me a bit of an understanding of what they think and what they feel about how everything's going, and sometimes they probably feel like the star power was at its peak then when you're talking about it, iteration 3, 4, 5, 6, and the star power now is probably a little bit less than what it is, and maybe that's a result of the international fixture being so jam-packed, but even the overseas players seem to be less now, and that a lot of that is to do with so many other tournaments around the world that you get so much more money than what you do in the Big Bash. Well, this year they've raised it. Sorry, last couple of years they've raised it, but yeah, I think the Big Bash is good. I think the amount of games they've got right now is a sweet spot. I reckon it's good, and I think they've kept the same time frame. So I think the Big Bash starts in 2 weeks, and it goes to the end of January. And I just wonder whether they can take like a week off minimum, so that my theory, and you're going to know more than me, Benny, is if you can leave someone wanting more a little bit, I think that's a pretty good opportunity. Correct.
Yeah.
If they all, it used to be, Big Bash is on tomorrow night. Yes, it's on tomorrow. Then got to the stage where it's like, fuck, Big Bash on. Like, it's got to be something else on we can watch. Yeah. And I said to someone, have Monday night free. Have Monday night free Big Bash, so that that those people within the family who don't want to watch cricket, they can have their cricket free night. And it's you're sitting there going, I didn't miss anything. Oh, Tuesday night, perfect. We're back on. How good's this? So I think they've got scope to do that, but there's so many other sides to it. There's a commercial layer to it as well, so I can see that.
What about ODI cricket?
Yeah, I think it's one of those. I feel like it's one of those secrets where how it's rated or how it's treated throughout international cricket is becoming a bit more of a side hustle. Even I read recently they're meeting about the Champions Trophy, which is another 50-over tournament, whether they need to have that or not. I'm a big believer, and whether they're doing this or not, like if you're having a World Cup tournament in June, well then come back 12 months, you probably focus a bit more on one-day cricket. You might have 80% one-day cricket, 20% T20 cricket, and then vice versa when it's a T20. Maybe even just that's all you do. If you have a series, just T20 series, and whether you have another team come over and have a try series, then you can do that as well. If there was a way that with a try series, that you could have India over every second year, that's a win.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people have got to get used to and accustomed to that one day. I think one day cricket's the one that's sort of like the fence sitter.
Yep.
Full of splinters, but it's also an opportunity, like we saw recently, to blood some young players and expose them to, because playing domestic cricket doesn't guarantee you're going to play on the big grounds, right? So, Victoria play most of their Shield games and one-day games at the Junction Oval. South Australia play a large chunk of their Shield games and one-day games at Karen Rolton Oval. New South Wales have got their state centre up there. Queensland have got Allan Border Field, where they play 60 to 70% of their games up there. So, and WA play their games at the Wacker. Being at Optus Stadium only 2 or 3 days ago, it's a coliseum, just like the G. Like you walk, and it's completely different. So, I think having those guys exposed to them. Yes, it's Australian colours. People just go, "Oh, this isn't a bloody Australian side. This should be." I can see both sides of it, but you need to expose them at some stage because, it's the only way we can do it.
So you made it to Perth for the first test?
Yeah, so luckily enough, part of my multiple roles off the field right now is with the ACA. So I host a function there, and it was day 4, the function. So after day 1, I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to Perth because of what happened. But luckily enough, the wicket flattened out and the Indians batting big, and really hoping that they got bowled out a lesser score, and it'd be one of those times where like there was so much media in the first 2 days just canning Australia, and I find it funny that they pull the trigger so fast on those things where it's like let's judge this over a period of time. I've read somewhere today, might have been Damien Fleming, who's going, Labuschagne's got one more test before he gets dropped. And McSweeney for that say, he's going to. I'm like, hang on a minute, like this kid's been thrown to the wolves here, opening instead of 3 or 4. You need to give him the series. Give him the series. If he's as good as you say he is, he'll be okay. But he needs the support. So, but yeah, up there for day 4 and got to see the wicket. It was, and it seemed like, again, from an outsider, a good cricket wicket. So it had a fair bit in it early, flattened out, and then the last day and a bit, the cracks were playing. It was a little bit up and down. So it was opportunities for everyone. And if you're on the right side of timings, whether you're batting at a certain stage of the game and you made the most of it, then, I think it was an okay wicket.
What's your take on picking the best batsman and putting him in the position you need? So obviously they've done that with McSweeney. Not a heap of experience opening at Shield level at all, but you need an opener and he's the best batsman available. You put him in there. Is that the right approach?
I like that as a rule of thumb. I mean, it makes sense. You're picking the best, aren't you? But in terms of the opening position, I think it's quite unique. I think the opening... saw Finchy do it. So Finchy was batting, I think, at 3-4, I think, like that for Victoria for a little bit. He'd opened maybe a couple of games at some stage during his career. He went to UAE and played against Pakistan in some tests, and the best place to bat over there is opening before the wicket just goes completely dusty. And I think he got a 50 over there, and then he come back to Australia and struggled as an opener. And I don't think that was fair on him. And maybe they went through the same process of going, well, Finchy's in the best form. We've got to pick him, find a spot. So there's times where it works. I just think in that environment, for that bloke to thrive without putting him at 6, he's got to bat it. Labuschagne and Smith 3 or 4, then someone's got to give and have 3 and 5, and then McSweeney coming at 4, in my opinion. And particularly while Green's out, to see there's no reason why. McSweeney does a right at 4 and then Green comes back in and goes, well, maybe you can open then. But, yeah, I think an opener needs to open.
And do you think Marnus gets through this? Obviously, there is a bit of pressure on him. He'll get a second test. But do you think he gets through it, or are they going to move on pretty quick? Because there's not a lot really knocking on the door.
So Inglis is there, and they'll play Inglis.
They'll put him at 3?
They won't put him at 3. Well, do you know what? They could.
Yeah.
They could. And I hope they don't, for Inglis's sake. Yeah. I think they'll give Marnus at least 2 more tests, unless he does what I did at Adelaide and make a pair. I think Marnus will actually be all right this test. I think the break here will do him good. He actually played a couple of Shield games as well, so I think he's had a fair bit of cricket and maybe a break away. He's so methodical. He thinks so much about the game. There's a lot of similarities with him and Smudge, but then at the same time they're opposites as well. So yeah, I think having those two in the same side doing the same things, it's great when they're both making runs, but it's almost like they're synced and they're sort of a bit out of touch at the moment, and it's happening to both of them, and they're the engine room, right? And if all of a sudden you're 2 down in the first 15 overs, there's a fair bit of pressure on them. Did
you play much with Steve Smith?
Nah, but I went to the academy with him. Great guy. He was there as a bowler who could bat. Great fella. Yeah. Not sure what else I could say, that we haven't seen. Great slipper, good strategist, and in his prime was just one of the best bats to watch. Was so good. But yeah, I think now, people talk about him being a problem solver and wanting to challenge himself and all that sort of jazz. And I think right now he's probably in the most vulnerable state of his career has been in the last 10 years, purely because normally when he problem solves, he finds the solution. He hasn't just quite cracked the solution yet, and he'll fall back to, like, I'm feeling good, I'm hitting the ball well, I'm doing this, but it's just like converting. And again, I don't think it's far away from Smudge to convert, but like this is the most challenged I think he's been.
speaking of form, Bancroft has recently gone through an absolute roller coaster, starting the Shield summer with a whole lot of ducks, a whole lot of fails, and then he gets a ton. Did you ever go through a form slump to that degree, or experience anything like that?
Yeah, I reckon it was probably not long after that I got dropped from the Test side. I didn't start that season that well, and so Big Bash came around, and then the remainder of the season, I think we had one Shield game left, and Greg Shippett, our coach, and Dave Hussey was having the same thing. And he wanted to keep us in the side because he usually trusted us, and we'd played a role for the last couple of years. And he sat us down, I remember this at the MCG, and he sat us down like on the far side of the ground where the punt road goals are, in footy season. So he sat down, and Huss and I were like, what's he going to do? And he goes, the fuck's going on with you two? And we're like, I don't know. Hopefully, we were hoping that you were going to tell us what was going on and how to fix it. And, we had a bit of a conversation. And what I'd worked out is, through the Big Bash time, there was a sports psych who was one of the sort of support staff amongst there who had played for England cricket as well, Jeremy Snape. And we did some breathing techniques and we did all this stuff. And it was doing all that. I've gone, this isn't working. I know what works. So I went back to what I used to do, and it started to slowly work. And why I couldn't do that in the first place was probably because I wasn't as clear-minded, and I was distrustful with everything that I did. And it's almost like the grass isn't greener on that side. It was green enough here, so I need to go back to where I was and start eating some of the grass.
You were part of 5 Sheffield Shields with Victoria. It was a pretty strong group that just sort of stuck together and had a lot of success. You were a big part of it. What was it like playing with that group? You sort of mentioned a few names before, Hussey, Hodge, Cameron White, these guys.
It was so the first one was amazing. So the first one I was sort of like a pretty, like I was selected most games, and I missed out, but it was 4 months after my dad had died. So that was a nice little way to sort of finish the season from an emotional perspective. Then the second one, the following year, I was out of the side come the final, and Chris Rogers had broken his hand or fractured his hand somehow and couldn't play. And he rang me. Then the coaches rang and said, you're in. And so, I just coattailed in and didn't make it in the first innings, but got runs in the second innings. And that was a group that we had for a little bit. I was probably young to sort of middle-aged in terms of that group, and that was pretty cool. But then we had a bit of a break. So that was 08, 9, 9, 10. And then we went again. Hang on.
Tattooed on the body?
Yeah, I do. 14, 15 was when we won 3 in a row. And that was when I was more senior. Felt like I'd contributed a bit more throughout the season, and one or two of the finals as well. And luckily enough, had some team success with St Kilda as well. So the sort of build up and hype around it was not lost on me, but it didn't overawe me. So it's great to look back that I was involved in some team success. Again, going back on things you wish you could do, I'd probably contribute a little bit more in those games. But the last 3, the 14-15 was in Tasmania. So we're trying to get some money from the government for the Junction Oval to have a state centre because the ground just wasn't up to scratch. The 08-9 Shield final got washed a day of rain. We couldn't get on for another half a day after that. So that the whole thing needed to be fixed up and cleaned up, which has happened now. So we played a home final at Blundstone Arena against Western Australia one year. Then the next year we finished second to South Australia, and we played them at Glenelg. So couldn't play at Adelaide Oval because footy was about to start. But we beat them, which is a bit of an anomaly back then because generally the Shield finalists either win or draw.
Yeah, just bat for 4 days.
Bat for as long as you can. So we've gone from Blundstone to Glenelg, and then the third one that I was a part of was at Alice Springs at Traeger Park, which obviously the D's had played a few games, and that became a bit of our fortress. And that was a bit of a special one because, again, we played South Australia and we were thinking, they're tails up. They'd lost on their own turf last season, and they're at solid vein of form, like some boys going really well, but they were really young still. And it was the game before to get into the final where Cameron White batted his absolute arse out, and he'd had a rough a couple of years. He was out of the side for a little bit, and a big call for a big name to be out, but his numbers weren't adding up. But when he come back in, by God, he was so instrumental in us getting to that Shield final, and we beat South Australia. And that was pretty cool.
You talk about not having a performance in particular in those games that you're overly proud of. Is there a knock in your career that you look back on and think that was me at my absolute peak? And if any knocks that just spring to mind?
I wish I'd known more about my career in terms of I could recall games. Games are the ones that I can't recall too much. Like there was one game we played at Tassie where it looked like we weren't going to get on. Like I'd been banging down the night before, all that day, and finally we got on. We had to play like 30 overs, I think, that day, and we were batting, and I had to be challenged. It wasn't their first pick bowling. I think they were missing one or two bowlers, but there was still some decent bowlers. James Faulkner was bowling there as well, and I thought this is going to be a bit of a handful. Like if I can get through the first half an hour, maybe hour, see how we go. And I did that. Got 70 in the first. They got 90. I think I might have got 2 90s or 2 70s in that match on a wicket that was doing a shitload. And I was pretty proud of how I batted. I adjusted. Normally I jump on the front foot to defend, and I was sitting back, and you get hit a little bit. You're playing miss, still looking to try and score, but just getting through some good bowling. And that was one I was pretty proud of. And my first 100 at the Gabba is always pretty special as well. So, I just wish I had a better recollection. Mate, honestly, I remember Andy Lee telling me about a time, and this has done the rounds a little bit of recent as well, where I'd made a pair obviously in Adelaide, and like 2 or 3 games into the Big Bash so only like a month later, there was a lady in the crowd who flashed her breast or bra at me and said, "My pair's better than yours," and how could I not remember that? But he's adamant that it happened, and so that's just I've got a shocking memory, Benny. I wish I had a better memory about, and that's to do with me, right?
Yeah, I can probably name more of your innings.
There you go. You probably could. Well, maybe you can come around. I'd love a book, and I'm not being vain here. A book about me and my cricket journey and bits and pieces of life in and around it. Not to like jump on at Angus and Robertson and start selling them, but just so I could think back, reflect. And when people ask me that same question, what's your best innings? And I'm going, I completely forgot about that. And I remember that now. That I busted my ass off. That bloke went through 2 spells, and I got through, and the wicket was doing this, and the night before this happened. That would help me a lot. So we'll chat about that off this.
You mentioned Andy Lee's name there.
Yep.
I don't know how. I think it was a bit of a promotional thing at the start of the Big Bash. Andy Lee went to the Stars and Hamish Blake went to the Renegades, and they were running waters. Andy Lee sort of stuck around. What was his involvement?
He's a legend. So initially it was just like the water boy, hydration manager, as he kept calling himself. We're so fortunate that we got Ando. Like they're both funny bastards. Like Hamish is so funny, but I think maybe because the Renegades might have had a couple of a bad season or two, that sort of he broke ties with them. And then Ando stuck around, was awesome. He had family come in. He would do songs before the game for us, as pre-match and pre-training songs. He'd travel with us sometimes out of his own cash, and he was just and he'd cook dinner for us. So twice, I reckon, he'd have so all the players and some support staff would come over to his place when he lived in Richmond, and just food and drink, and away you go.
What's it like, even flashback to the Test career, you finish a Test match at, say, 6 p.m. What's the recovery like until you wake up the next morning and go again?
Test match is a funny one. So in Brisbane, a lot of the guys had their partners and or kids as well with them. So going out mid-test, you're sort of going out with those who don't have their partners or kids with them, or, these guys probably have good relationships. So all of a sudden, let's say Hussey and Ponting have their partners and kids, they might go out for dinner together and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't like a Shield game. Like Shield game, if all 11 wanted to go to the one place, you'd go. If it was only like 3 here and 4 there, then so be it. Like everyone's sort of going out for dinner. But in those 2 tests, I found myself with, I think, Nathan Lyon and Ed Cowan didn't have their partners over at the time, and they were awesome to me. Even after the first test, I thought great. Let's have a beer. Test match done. Still like a week to the next test, and thinking, yeah, everyone's in. But it was only like, I think like 4 or 5 at the bar, and then those 2 with me up the road at the pub. So yeah, it's a lot different than the Shield stuff where you have KFC parties. You like, it used to be one of those ones where it's probably not a culture you want to encourage too much, but let's say you're bowling first on day 1, and all of a sudden you bowl them out, and as an opener you've got to go in and face 8 overs, and you want to be there for 8 overs because you know what, you got to get the bowlers back out again next day, and here's a good opportunity to make some runs. Sometimes we can't control it. All right, you get out with 3 overs to go, you're 1 down, you hope the next day your team's batting all day. You know what, when we go for dinner, I might have a couple extra reds or a couple extra beers, or I might go, instead of going dinner and home, you go dinner. And when you're in a state, I think one of the best things you can do is actually look what the state or the city's got to offer. So you go there and you have a look. You go to a bar and have another drink, and then go, righto, I don't need to be too dusty. I've got to help. I'll throw some balls to the boys, but if all of a sudden we're all out by tea, I need to be on for the last session as well.
Jump in the field.
Yeah, correct.
Do you have any? You battle with so many great players. Do you have any favourites? I know from all levels of cricket, there's people you like batting with, people you don't, people you take it really seriously with, and then others who you just take the piss with. Are there names that come to mind in that regard?
So Nick Jewell was good to keep me focused because I just wanted to hit the ball and score all the time. And as an opener, he was really good down the other end, and he'd get me through some tough times of like, stay straight, mate, stay straight. Dave Hussey was a weird one. So Dave would just fill you full of confidence. So normally if you've hit a boundary or hit a run, someone come up and pat you in the back or, go, great work. He would hit the boundary and you'd walk sort of mid-pitch after that, whilst that ball's going to the boundary, and he'd tap you on the shoulder and say, well done, mate. I'm like, I didn't fucking do anything. What are you talking about? It was funny. Cam White, I learnt pretty quickly. I was busting my gut at the whacker one time, and I got to 40. We'd lost the wicket. Cam White comes to the crease. He faced a few balls, and then all of a sudden he hits the ball straight to point, calls yes, and like I would have been run out by half a pitch. So I've dived everything. Slips are laughing, going, oh, he's trying to torture, all that sort of stuff. And I turn around expecting him to be halfway up the wicket, sort of going, you're right, mate, did you make it? Sorry, something like that. He's leaning on his bat with his leg in front of the other leg. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? And I got down and I go, what's going on there, mate? And he goes, I'm on 0, back the fuck up. And so quickly, people got these superstitions. Hussey, it always remind people if they're on a pair or like a duck going into their second innings. But he took that into his batting as well. Like he was so anxious when he started, let alone if he's on a pair as well. So Brad Hodge was the greatest batter. You'd be batting at one end, grinding it out, and then you'd watch him bat, and you're like, how does he do that? How does he do that? And all of a sudden you do that once or twice to a bowler, and then they just go to water. But he was phenomenal. But yeah, they're probably the ones that stand out for me.
Hodgie's a name that gets thrown around with players that should have played more international cricket. Are
Yep.
there other names, current or past, that you think, gee, they could have played a lot more at the top level?
Dave Hussey's definitely someone. So Dave played 60 or 70 one-day games and probably 40 T20 games for Australia. But I think he would have been really, really good over in India in the test matches and potentially other venues as well. We look at how Mitch Marsh and Travis Head approach their batting, and Dave wasn't too dissimilar to how they go about it.
Very Travis Head.
Yeah, so I think I would have loved to have seen him play Test cricket. He put some decent numbers up over Shield cricket over a couple of years. You put me on the spot there a little bit. Like I love to think about some of the players who should have played a little bit more. There was plenty before my time, like Martin Love, as I said, Jimmy Marr. Darren Lehman didn't play a hell of a lot of Test cricket.
Yeah,
that I think he could have. There's a couple of Tassie boys, Jamie Cox, Michael Devanito, who could have done that as well. So, there's plenty beforehand, as I said. Jamie Siddons the one that gets talked about the most, sort of my age and older, who was the unluckiest to not to play more for Australia. He didn't get a game at all, I don't think. So.
Yeah, and there's a few current ones as well, probably with how strong the bowling lineup's been for so many years that, Michael Nisa, Jai Richardson haven't really had the chance, because they could probably be.
The blessing for Jai, he's still young enough.
still
He's only
young,
26, and looking at the last Shield game, he looked like he popped his shoulder out, giving someone a high five, and so all of a sudden you need to give certainty to selectors to say, I can play 2 or 3 tests in a row, but that game looked like he's bowling with pace and with swing and control, which is great. Nessa 100%, his control and his bowling smarts right now are second to not many. And even Scotty Boland, and can bat as well and field in the gully. Scotty Boland, and we probably look at Bolo and go, oh yeah, but he's in the mix. But he's only played like 10 tests, I think it is. And he hasn't played much in the last 2 years. One Ashes test match, I think, 1 test there, and he's just been on the pine for the rest of it. Last summer over here, the games were over and done with fairly quickly, that the bowling group didn't have to have the rest. And I feel like that will be completely different this time around. I just hope so. Scotty's going to play with a Prime Minister's 11 coming up, and he just needs some overs under his belt before he comes in to the match, So I'm hoping he can play, obviously bowl some overs through that game. And then if all goes to plan, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets rolled out the MCG again.
Yeah. Any bowlers in particular you really struggled facing?
Spin, like part-time spin. I struggled against spin, full stop. But I remember a time, there was a bloke called Aaron Nye who played for Queensland, and I reckon I turned him from a part-time spinner into a semi-full-time spinner at some stage, which would have helped some batters. But really good batter. There was one time he come on to bowl. This is one of those times where we've bowled them out and we're batting for 15 overs, and just for some stupid reason played for turn, inside edge the ball straight to bat pad, and I walked off and just shattered. I'm going, this is like, you're shit, mate. Like, why are you doing this? I was calling myself shit. And the next day, Jewel and Hodge batted for, I think most of the day. Hodge, they both made, I think Jewel made 140, Hodge made 200. I'm like, you dickhead. But what had turned out, I got off the ground, and Julie comes off the ground and goes, the fuck are you walking for? I'm like, well, I hit it straight to bat pad. And he goes, the umpire wasn't going to give you out. I was like, so I never walked after that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Walk. But that, to your point, like, bowlers that are challenging were, I found like sometimes opening the batting to blokes like Chad Sayers and Trent Copeland, the slow seamers, I had a bit of difficulty with. But the quicker you bowl, I was happy for them. Yeah, for sure.
Any lightning quick? Obviously, Sean Tate had a whippy action.
Tatey was the fastest easily. So I try and compare and tell people the difference between Sean Tate and Brett Lee are the cues you get from their action. So Brett Lee, again, bowls bloody fast, but you get that extra sort of 1/10 of a second to be on because you see all the cues. He's so streamlined. Where Tatey, there's 2 things with Tatey. One is you lose the ball a little bit, goes behind him, a la, Jeff Thompson. There's a couple, actually. The second one is when you're at the non-striker's end and you're listening to him come down and bowl, and you see, like, you watch it from the non-striker's end, you're like, holy shit. Then when you work out that he can't control it as much as he'd like, so with a new ball, he'd swing it away from the right-hander predominantly, but something might go a little bit wrong and that ball just tails back in. And so as a lefty or anyone, if you don't know which way it's swinging at 145 to 150 Ks, and it's scary because you can't set up. Normally you look at a spot on the wicket where you think the ball's going to be. That spot is the whole wicket. You don't know. So
he doesn't know. So what chance have you got?
He knows less than what a Brett Lee would, and that was the intimidating part. But the quickest ever ball I'd faced, so I faced Mitchell Johnson, who was fast too, but the fastest ball or over I faced was the bloke called Ben Edmondson, who played for South Australia and Western Australia. And he played in a game where, Mike Hussey was playing, Langer was playing, Gilchrist was playing, and pull shot was my go-to. Like, you bowl it short, I'll pull it. Even if there's 2 out, I'll do it safely. That's my shot. And he'd come in and he'd bowl this ball, and I thought I was in position to hit it. And I got halfway through my shot, and all I could hear the ball was like already straight into Gilchrist's gloves. And I'm like, shit, this bloke's bowling quick. I might need to duck the next one, and I've got to be on here. And that was the quickest spell of bowling I faced.
Very good. Bobby, we could probably sit here and talk about this sort of stuff all day, but better let you go. It's been great to chat. Love the stories and excited to see what the summer has in store for the Aussies. Really appreciate your time.
No worries. I'm excited too. Thanks for having me, Benny.